We'll learn about API composition pattern, what it is, why it's becoming an industry standard. Basically, with the advent of microservices, we have well-defined microservices for every feature we want to develop and scale independently. Sometimes the end user or the client needs of a use case where it needs to query these multiple APIs to gather the entire data. Now, in this case, the simpler solution is the client will actually do all the hard work of calling each of these APIs, ensuring that it has the proper request response, handles the edge cases, failures, etc., and does the all the hard work to get all this data and then use the data to render whatever it needs to for the user. Now, this has obvious drawbacks, as in there will be high network latency for the round trip calls from the client to the backend. Then, obviously, client needs to be now coupled and know how these different APIs need to be connected, and if anything changes, the client needs to change. So, can we do better? Yeah. So, one simple pattern that it's very common now and becoming an industry standard is called the API composition pattern. Here, basically, you have a dedicated service which acts as an API composer. What it means is here the client will come. This will be a unified layer that will contain all your APIs data and how to connect with those backend APIs. The client can see okay what it needs to do, and it just interact with the API composer. It does not need to interact with the end backend service who is actually doing the hard work or implementing things. The API composer will have the visibility on what the request response for this API looks like. It has a unified and a universal way to connect to these APIs. You need not have five different ways to connect to five different APIs, and it acts as a central manager for all these things. And this has a lot of benefits. Obviously, there is consistency when you're connecting to multiple APIs. All these will be consistent since you're connecting to one unified API. It handles, makes sure that all these different types of things are not happening in different APIs. It gives discoverability to all the APIs that do exist. You need not figure out if it exists or re-implement things. And it also acts as a middleware layer where it handles authentication, authorization, and other cross-cutting concerns, if like error handling, error exception handling, etc. And one very common thing that we are seeing in GraphQL is supergraph or API composition, which is very popular in GraphQL, which is one of the real-world applications that GraphQL heavily emphasizes on.